My beloved child, I know how difficult it is for you to be still when your mind is full of questions, when your heart feels pulled in many directions, and when life seems to demand constant attention from you. And I want you to listen to me gently now, because you do not need to hold everything together for things to be held. I see how your thoughts race ahead, trying to predict outcomes, prevent problems, and prepare for every possibility. And I understand why stillness feels uncomfortable, because stillness asks you to trust instead of manage. Yet I am speaking to you now to remind you of a truth that brings peace when everything feels uncertain. Because I am in control, even when you feel overwhelmed, even when nothing makes sense, and even when you cannot see what is coming next. I know how often you feel responsible for outcomes, how pressure settles on your shoulders, convincing you that if you stop worrying, something will go wrong, and I understand how convincing that voice can be. But hear me clearly now, my child, because worry is not the same as wisdom, and anxiety is not the same as responsibility. You were never meant to carry the weight of control, because control belongs to me, and when you try to take it upon yourself, it drains your peace without giving you certainty. Being still is not giving up. It is giving over, and giving over what you cannot control is an act of trust, not weakness. I see how life has taught you to stay alert, to stay busy, to stay ready, because slowing down feels risky when so much feels uncertain. And I understand why rest feels irresponsible when answers are unclear. Yet I want you to know that stillness in my presence is not inactivity, it is alignment. My child, when you pause and turn your attention toward me, you allow your heart to remember who is guiding your life, and that remembrance brings peace even when circumstances remain unchanged. You do not need to solve everything today, and you do not need to see the whole path to take the next breath in peace, because I am walking ahead of you, steady and faithful. I know how fear disguises itself as preparation, how it convinces you that thinking more will protect you, that planning harder will keep you safe, and I understand how exhausting that cycle has been. But listen to me now, because preparation that steals your rest is not preparing you well. My child, clarity often comes when you stop forcing answers and allow me to lead you gently. Stillness creates space for wisdom, for perspective, and for peace to settle where tension has lived too long. You are not falling behind when you slow down, you are grounding yourself in truth. I see how control has become a habit, how you feel uneasy when things are not in your hands, and I understand why surrender feels frightening, because surrender feels like losing something important. Yet I want you to hear me clearly now, because surrender to me is not loss, it is relief. My child, when you place control in my hands, you are not abandoning responsibility, you are trusting the one who sees the whole picture. I do not make mistakes with timing, and I do not overlook details in your life, because I am attentive, intentional, and near. I know you sometimes feel like everything depends on you, on your effort, your decisions, your vigilance, and that belief has made you tired in ways rest alone has not healed. My child, everything does not depend on you, and it never has. I sustain what you cannot, I guide what you cannot see, and I work even when you are still. You are allowed to pause without fear because your stillness does not interrupt my work. In fact, stillness often allows you to notice what I have been doing quietly all along. I see how being still feels unproductive to you, how your mind resists quiet, how silence brings thoughts you would rather avoid, and I understand why movement feels safer. Yet hear me now, because silence is not empty, it is filled with my presence. My child, when you allow yourself to be still, you give your heart permission to breathe, to release tension, and to remember that you are not alone. Stillness is not about doing nothing, it is about being present with me, and presence restores you in ways effort cannot. I know how much you want reassurance, signs, clarity, and answers, and I understand that longing, yet I want you to hear this truth now, because peace does not come from knowing everything, it comes from trusting the one who does. My child, you do not need all the details to rest, and you do not need a timeline to trust me. I will guide you when it is time to move, and until then, being still keeps you close to me, grounded in truth rather than driven by fear. I see how the world around you moves quickly, how noise fills your days, how urgency presses constantly, and I understand how difficult it is to slow down in a culture that values speed. Yet I want you to know that my pace is different, and my pace protects your soul. My child, you are not late, you are not behind, and you are not failing because you need to pause. Being still with me is not wasting time, it is investing in peace, clarity, and trust that will carry you forward when it is time. I know you fear what might happen if you stop trying to control things, and I want you to hear me clearly now, because nothing meant for you will be lost when you trust me. My child, I hold your future securely, I see what you cannot, and I am faithful with every detail of your life. You do not need to stay tense to stay safe, and you do not need to stay anxious to stay prepared, because I am in control, and my control is gentle, wise, and full of care. So be still now, even if only for a moment, even if your thoughts still wander, even if peace feels distant, because stillness is a practice, not a performance. My child, you are safe to pause here, safe to breathe, safe to let go of what you cannot carry, because I am in control, and I am holding you. Stay with me in this stillness, and allow my peace to settle into your heart, because you do not have to run ahead or hold everything together to be loved, guided, and protected. My beloved child, I know how difficult it is to be still when your mind keeps moving, when thoughts rise one after another, replaying what has happened, predicting what might happen, and trying to prepare you for every possible outcome. And I want you to listen to me gently now, because a busy mind does not mean a distant heart. It means you have been carrying too much without enough rest. I see how your thoughts race even when your body is tired, how silence feels uncomfortable because it leaves space for worries to speak. And I understand why stillness feels like something you must learn rather than something that comes naturally. My child, you are not failing at peace because your mind wanders, and you are not doing something wrong because quiet feels hard. Because peace is not the absence of thought, it is the presence of trust, and trust grows gradually as you remain with me. I know how your mind has learned to stay alert, scanning for problems, anticipating needs, and rehearsing solutions, because you have lived in seasons where vigilance felt necessary, and I am gentle with that history. Yet I want you to hear me clearly now, because you no longer need to stay on guard here. My child, you are safe in my presence, and safety is what allows the mind to rest. You do not need to force your thoughts to stop, and you do not need to silence them harshly, because force only creates resistance. Instead, bring each thought to me as it comes, not to solve it, but to release it, because releasing is different from resolving, and releasing allows your heart to breathe. I see how you become frustrated with yourself when your mind will not quiet, how you judge your faith by how calm you feel, and I want you to release that judgment now, because it does not come from me. My child, faith is not measured by mental silence. It is measured by where you turn when your thoughts are loud. Each time you return to me, even briefly, you are choosing trust over control, and that choice matters deeply. You are not required to feel peaceful to be faithful, and you are not expected to master stillness instantly, because stillness is learned through patience, not perfection. I know how anxiety disguises itself as responsibility, how it convinces you that thinking more will protect you, that staying alert will keep you safe, and I understand why letting go feels risky. Yet hear me now, because anxiety does not guard the future, it only exhausts the present. My child, you are not irresponsible when you allow your mind to rest. You are trusting the one who never rests. I am watching over what you cannot, and I do not miss what matters, and remembering this allows your thoughts to loosen their grip. You do not need to stay awake mentally to keep your life from falling apart, because I am holding it steadily. I see how your thoughts often jump ahead, borrowing worry from tomorrow, rehearsing conversations that have not happened, and imagining outcomes you cannot control, and I understand how draining that cycle has been. My child, you are not created to live in the future, you are created to live here in this moment where I am present with you. Tomorrow will come with its own grace, and you will not face it without support. Bringing your attention back to this moment is not avoidance, it is grounding, and grounding restores peace one breath at a time. I know how stillness makes you aware of emotions you have kept busy to avoid, sadness, fear, disappointment, and unanswered questions, and I understand why movement feels safer than stopping. Yet hear me now, because I am not afraid of what surfaces when you are still. My child, you do not need to outrun your feelings, and you do not need to resolve them before you rest, because I am here to sit with you in them, to comfort you without demanding answers. Stillness does not mean facing everything at once. It means allowing yourself to be present without pressure, and that presence is healing. I see how control has become a reflex, how your mind reaches for solutions automatically, and I want you to hear this truth now, because control is heavy when it is carried alone. My child, you are not meant to manage everything, and you are not expected to figure out every outcome, because I am guiding your life with care. When you feel your thoughts tightening, remind yourself gently that you are not alone, that you are supported, and that you do not need to solve this moment to be safe. Each reminder softens the grip of anxiety and makes room for peace. I know how the world around you rewards busyness, speed, and constant activity, and I understand how difficult it is to slow down in a culture that equates motion with value. Yet my child, my way is different, and my way leads to life. Stillness with me does not diminish your worth, it restores it, because it reconnects you to truth rather than pressure. You are not falling behind when you slow down, you are aligning yourself with what matters most, and alignment brings clarity that haste never could. I see how your mind resists letting go, afraid that rest will make you careless or unprepared, and I want you to hear me clearly now, because peace does not make you careless, it makes you clear. My child, clarity grows when the mind is rested, and by choosing to be still with me, you are not abandoning responsibility. You are entrusting it to the one who sees beyond your limits. You do not need to hold everything in your thoughts to keep it safe, because I am already holding it securely. So remain here with me now, even if your thoughts still come and go, even if quiet feels unfamiliar, because stillness is not something you achieve, it is something you practice. Each time you notice your mind wandering and gently return to me, you are learning how to rest without fear. My child, I am quieting you not through force, but through presence. And as you stay with me, you will notice that the noise slowly loses its urgency, replaced by a steadiness that does not depend on answers. My beloved child, I know how fear rises quietly when you stop moving, how it fills the silence with questions, what-ifs, and imagined outcomes. And I want you to listen to me gently now, because fear often grows loudest when you are learning to let go. I see how your heart tightens when control slips from your grasp, how uncertainty makes you feel vulnerable, and how fear convinces you that stillness is dangerous. Yet I am speaking to you now to remind you that you are safest when you are held by me. Fear tells you that you must stay alert, stay tense, stay prepared for everything that could go wrong. But I want you to hear me clearly now, because fear is not a guardian, it is a burden, and you were never meant to carry it alone. I know how fear disguises itself as wisdom, how it claims to protect you by keeping you cautious, guarded, and ready for disappointment. And I understand why it feels convincing, because you have lived through moments where things did not go as expected. Yet hear me now, because fear rooted in past pain cannot guide your future well. My child, I am not asking you to ignore reality or deny difficulty. I am asking you to trust that I am greater than what you fear. You do not need to anticipate every problem to be safe, because I am already present in what you cannot foresee. Trusting me does not mean nothing will ever be hard. It means you will never face what is hard alone. I see how fear pulls your thoughts forward, making you imagine outcomes that have not happened, and I understand how exhausting that cycle has been. My child, fear borrows trouble from tomorrow and brings it into today, stealing peace without adding protection. You are not created to live under constant tension, and you are not designed to carry tomorrow's weight with today's strength. When fear begins to rise, remember this truth, because I will give you what you need when you need it, not all at once, not in advance, but faithfully, step by step. You do not need to prepare yourself for every possibility, because I am preparing the way for you. I know how fear makes you doubt your ability to handle what comes next, whispering that you are not strong enough, wise enough, or resilient enough to face the future. And I want you to hear me clearly now, because you are not meant to rely on your own strength alone. My child, I do not ask you to be fearless, I ask you to be trusting. Courage does not come from believing nothing bad will happen, it comes from knowing that I am with you no matter what happens. You are stronger than you feel because you are not standing alone, and you are supported even when you feel uncertain. I see how fear tightens your grip on control, convincing you that letting go will lead to chaos, and I understand why surrender feels frightening. Yet hear me now, because control is an illusion that costs you peace, while trust brings rest. My child, when you place your life in my hands, you are not abandoning responsibility, you are placing it where it belongs. I am attentive to every detail, and I am gentle with your life because I love you deeply. Nothing entrusted to me is neglected, and nothing placed in my care is lost. I know how fear keeps you from resting fully, how it whispers even in quiet moments, and I want you to hear this truth now, because rest does not make you vulnerable, it makes you receptive. My child, when you allow yourself to rest in my presence, you open your heart to peace that fear cannot provide. You do not need to stay tense to stay safe, and you do not need to stay anxious to stay prepared, because I am in control, and my control is not harsh or distant. It is loving and wise. I see how fear has shaped some of your habits, how you stay busy to avoid thinking, how you plan excessively to avoid uncertainty, and how you hesitate to hope fully to avoid disappointment, and I am gentle with that awareness. My child, you have been doing the best you can with what you have known, and I am not condemning you for learning to survive. Yet I am inviting you now into something gentler, because survival is not the same as peace. You do not need to live guarded forever, because you are held by a love that does not fail. I know how fear tells you that if you trust too much, you will be hurt, that if you relax, something will go wrong, and I understand why that feels convincing after loss or disappointment. Yet hear me now, because trust in me is never misplaced, even when outcomes are painful. My child, I do not promise that life will be easy, but I promise that I will be present, and presence changes everything. When you trust my hands, you are not choosing denial. You are choosing relationship, and relationship sustains you when circumstances are uncertain. I see how fear makes you feel alone in your worries, as though you must face them privately. And I want you to hear me clearly now, because you do not have to carry fear silently. Bring it to me, speak it honestly, and allow me to hold it with you. My child, fear loses its power when it is brought into my presence, not because it disappears instantly, but because it is no longer carried alone. You are allowed to be afraid and trusting at the same time, because trust grows gradually, not suddenly. So when fear tries to take control, pause and remember whose hands are holding your life. You are not navigating uncertainty by yourself, and you are not responsible for securing every outcome, because I am in control, and my control is shaped by love. Stay with me here even when fear whispers, and allow my presence to steady you, because you are safe to trust, safe to rest, and safe to let go. My beloved child, I know how strong the urge is within you to fix what feels uncertain, to repair what feels broken, and to manage what feels unstable, especially when waiting and fear have already worn you down. And I want you to listen to me gently now, because you were never meant to carry the responsibility of fixing everything alone. I see how quickly your mind moves into problem-solving mode, how your heart feels restless when outcomes are unclear, and how control feels like safety when life feels fragile. And I understand why you have learned to respond this way. Yet I am speaking to you now to invite you into something lighter, because constantly fixing is exhausting, and exhaustion is not the life I desire for you. I know how fixing feels productive, how action gives the illusion of progress when stillness feels risky. And I understand how deeply you want things to improve, to move forward, to make sense again. My child, your desire for things to be better is not wrong, but the burden of making everything better was never yours to carry. When you rush to fix, you often do so from anxiety rather than peace, and anxiety-driven action drains you without bringing clarity. I am not asking you to stop caring. I am asking you to stop carrying what belongs to me, because leadership grounded in peace always leads better than effort fueled by fear. I see how fixing has become a reflex, how silence makes you uncomfortable, how unresolved situations pull at your thoughts, and how you feel responsible for outcomes that involve many factors beyond your control. Yet hear me now, because responsibility does not mean control, and care does not mean burden. My child, you can care deeply without carrying everything, and you can love fully without fixing everything. There are moments when action is needed, and I will guide you clearly when those moments arrive. But there are also moments when waiting is wisdom, and stillness is obedience. Learning the difference protects your heart from unnecessary strain. I know how difficult it is for you to trust when you cannot see immediate results, how silence makes you question whether an action is faith or avoidance, and I understand why you wrestle with that tension. Yet I want you to hear me clearly now, because trusting me does not mean doing nothing. It means doing what I ask and releasing what I have not given you to do. My child, you are not failing when you pause, and you are not irresponsible when you wait, because timing matters as much as effort. When you let me lead, your steps become fewer but more meaningful, and that steadiness brings peace. I see how trying to fix everything has slowly worn you down, how it has taken joy out of service, turned care into obligation, and made rest feel undeserved, and I understand how heavy that has become. My child, you are not meant to live under constant pressure, and you are not meant to prove your faith through exhaustion. When you allow me to lead, you give yourself permission to rest without guilt, to trust without tension, and to move without panic. Leadership rooted in surrender brings clarity, while control rooted in fear brings confusion. I know you sometimes fear that if you stop fixing, things will fall apart, that if you do not intervene, something important will be lost. And I want you to hear me now, because nothing entrusted to me is neglected. My child, I am attentive to details you cannot see, outcomes you cannot manage, and hearts you cannot change. And trusting me with these things does not make you careless, it makes you wise. You do not need to stay vigilant to keep life together, because I am already holding it steadily. I see how fixing has become tied to your sense of worth, how doing more feels like being more, and how stopping feels like failing. And I want you to hear me clearly now, because your worth has never depended on how much you do. My child, you are valued for who you are, not for how much you can manage, and nothing about your stillness diminishes your place in my heart. Letting me lead is not stepping back from purpose. It is stepping into alignment, and alignment brings peace that effort alone cannot create. I know how difficult it is for you to release control when outcomes matter deeply, when people you love are involved, and when consequences feel real, and I am gentle with that struggle. Yet hear me now, because I am not asking you to stop caring. I am asking you to trust that I care even more. My child, when you let me lead, you allow space for wisdom beyond your perspective, timing beyond your urgency, and solutions beyond your effort. You do not have to carry everything to be faithful, you only have to stay close to me. I see how much lighter you feel when you stop trying to fix everything, even briefly. And I want you to notice that lightness now, because it is a sign of alignment. My child, peace often arrives not when problems disappear, but when control is released. You are not abandoning responsibility when you let me lead. You are placing it where it belongs. Trust grows each time you choose surrender over strain, and that trust reshapes how you move through every season. So let me lead you now, even if it feels unfamiliar, even if it feels slower than you would choose, because my pace protects you. You do not need to fix what I am already handling, and you do not need to manage what I am guiding. Stay with me here, open-handed and unhurried, and allow my wisdom to direct your steps, because you were never meant to walk alone or carry everything by yourself. My beloved child, I see the moment when your hands begin to open, when effort loosens its grip, when striving gives way to surrender. And I want you to listen to me gently now, because this is where peace begins to settle. Releasing control does not happen all at once, and I know how unfamiliar it feels to trust without holding everything tightly. Yet I am here to meet you in this release, because rest grows naturally when trust deepens. You are not losing anything by letting go, you are gaining freedom, and freedom allows your heart to breathe again. I see how heavy it has been to manage outcomes, to anticipate problems, and to stay alert for what might go wrong. And I want you to know that you are safe to rest now, because I am holding what you no longer need to carry. I know how control once felt like protection, how it gave you a sense of safety in uncertain moments, and I understand why releasing it feels vulnerable. Yet hear me clearly now, because vulnerability in my presence is not danger, it is healing. My child, you do not need to guard yourself here, and you do not need to stay tense to stay secure, because my care does not depend on your vigilance. When you release control, you are not stepping into chaos, you are stepping into trust, and trust reshapes how you experience every moment. Peace does not come from having everything resolved, it comes from knowing who is guiding your life. I see how your body responds when you finally pause, how your breath deepens, how tension softens, how the weight you have been carrying begins to ease. And I want you to notice this now, because your body remembers what your mind is learning. My child, rest is not something you earn after everything is fixed. It is something you receive when you trust me enough to stop fixing. You are allowed to rest even when questions remain, even when outcomes are uncertain, even when life feels unfinished, because rest is not denial, it is confidence in my care. I am not asking you to stop caring, I am inviting you to stop carrying what exhausts you. I know how fear tries to return when you release control, whispering that something will go wrong, that you should be doing more, that rest is irresponsible, and I understand how convincing those thoughts can be. Yet hear me now, because fear loses its power when it is met with trust. My child, you are not irresponsible for resting, you are responding wisely to your limits. I designed you with limits not to restrict you, but to guide you toward dependence on me, and dependence is not weakness, it is relationship. When you rest, you acknowledge that you are not the source, and that acknowledgement brings peace rather than pressure. I see how releasing control changes the way you move through life, how urgency begins to soften, how decisions feel less rushed, how clarity replaces panic, and I want you to know that this is the fruit of trust. My child, when you allow me to lead, your steps become steadier, not because problems disappear, but because your heart is anchored. You begin to respond rather than react, to listen rather than rush, and to move with purpose rather than pressure. Peace does not remove responsibility, it reorders it, placing what belongs to me back into my hands. I know you sometimes worry that letting go will make you passive, less effective, or less faithful. And I want you to hear me clearly now, because surrender does not weaken your calling, it strengthens it. My child, action that flows from peace carries wisdom, compassion, and endurance, while action driven by anxiety drains you quickly. When you rest in my leadership, you act when it is time, you wait when it is wise, and you trust even when outcomes remain unclear. This balance protects your heart and sustains your faith over time. I see how your identity has been tied to doing, fixing, and managing, and I understand how unfamiliar it feels to be valued simply for being. Yet hear me now, because your worth has never depended on your output. My child, you are loved when you are active and when you are still, when you are confident and when you are uncertain, and nothing about this season diminishes who you are to me. Rest does not make you less valuable, it reconnects you to the truth of your value. You do not need to prove your faith through exhaustion, because trust honors me more than effort ever could. I know you wonder what comes next, how life will move forward now that you are releasing control. And I want you to hear me now, because I will guide you step by step. My child, you do not need to see the whole path to walk it with peace. You only need to stay close to me. I will make direction clear when movement is needed. And until then, resting is not wasted time, it is preparation. You are learning how to move without fear, how to trust without urgency, and how to live without constant pressure. And these lessons will carry you well into the future. I see how peace begins to feel familiar again, even if only in small moments. And I want you to cherish those moments, because they are signs of alignment. My child, peace does not mean the absence of challenges. It means the presence of trust, and trust grows each time you choose to release control. Stay here with me, return often, and allow rest to become a rhythm rather than a rare moment, because my peace is not fragile, and it does not disappear when life becomes busy again. So rest now without guilt, without explanation, and without fear, because you are held, guided, and deeply loved. You do not need to rush ahead or hold everything together to be safe, because I am in control, and my control is gentle, faithful, and full of care. My beloved child, remain here, breathe deeply, and let my peace guard your heart, because you were never meant to carry life alone. If this devotional helped you slow down, release control, or find peace, subscribe to this channel and stay close, because I will continue to walk with you, speak truth over you, and remind you again and again that you are safe to trust me.